May some saving sense of humor liberate us from arrogance and pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are. May we make amends if we chance to ridicule others or their views. May we be cured from making war and calling it peace, from special privilege and calling it justice, from indifference and calling it tolerance, from polluting and calling it progress. From all these may we be cured. May it be so.
The title of today's Dharma talk is fart. And you're probably wondering why that would be a Dharma talk topic. But it actually comes from a very old Zen story. And it was between two masters. So the first master was Su Shi, not to be confused with sushi, who was an avid student of Buddha's teachings. And he was also quick-witted and pretty humorous. He was a man of many talents, poetry, calligraphy. He was also a painter, and I heard a rather good dancer. He was a dedicated lay practitioner of Zen practice, and he was very serious, very self-disciplined. And he often would discuss the Dharma with his good friend, who was the Zen Master Fo Yin, who just happened to live across the river from him. So one day, Su Shi was feeling pretty good about himself and pretty good about his practice. And he decided that he was going to write a poem. And then he liked his poem so much, he was going to send it to his friend, the master across the river. So Su Shi was also known as Su Dongpo. So Su Dongpo was inspired, and he wrote the following poem. I bow my head to the heaven within heaven, hairline raised illuminating the universe. The eight winds cannot move me, sitting still upon the purple golden lotus. So he's in this poem. He's saying, "This is how much I've achieved in my practice. I'm doing good. I'm there. I'm impressing even myself." So the eight winds in the poem is referring to things such as the winds that take away our peace. And they are praise, ridicule, honor, disgrace, gain, loss, pleasure, and misery. And these winds, these temptations that we experience take away our peace, take away our groundedness. And right here, Su Dongpo or Su Shi is saying, hey, I've arrived in my practice that this stuff doesn't even bother me. I'm good. I'm golden. I'm grounded. I'm free of these interpersonal forces, these winds of life that keep me from peace and keep me from my practice. So, impressed with himself, Su Dongpo sends a servant to hand carry the poem that he wrote out in beautiful calligraphy to give to his friend Fo Yin. He's sure his friend would be equally impressed. When Fo Yin read the poem, he immediately saw that it was both a tribute to the Buddha and a declaration of spiritual refinement. Smiling, the Zen Master wrote "fart" on the manuscript and sent it back to his friend Su Shi. Su Shi was expecting a compliment on how good he was doing and a seal of approval from the Zen Master. Instead, he received the poem back with the word, or the kanji for fart, across his beautiful poem. He was, to say the least, shocked and a little taken aback. And the story says he outburst in anger, saying that how dare he insult me, that old lousy monk? What does he know? He's got a lot of explaining to do. So, of course, full of indignation, what is the first thing that he does? Well, Su Shi says, I'm going over there. I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. And he gets in the boat. He ferries him across. He goes over to his friend Fo Yin's place where he lives to demand an apology. So Once he gets to Fu Yin's house, he goes to the door, it's locked, and he looks, and pinned to the door is a note addressed to Su Shi with the following two lines, quote, "The eight winds cannot move me. One fart blows me across the river," end quote. So I share this story because for a few reasons. First, one of the reasons was that there was a post that was shared last Sunday when I was away in the mountains, and on further review, the person who posted, it appears that they really weren't interested in our fellowship. And it also appears that it looked like the motivation of the post was to sow division, or to get someone's goat, so to speak. And the post itself was relatively innocuous, but it took a political position that was inappropriate for our page. And as I've explained on the Facebook page itself, many of you have already read that. If you haven't, you can go read that. The post itself did generate some division and some less than appropriate speech. Some were triggered. Others were triggered by people being triggered. Thus is life in the social media age. We live in polarized times, and we are more cut off from one another than ever before because of the pandemic, which makes our interactions even more fragmented, heightened, wrought with misperception, or a significance that make them more important than they really are. Charged times like this, we all can get a little histrionic. The other reason is I just love the story. I love the sense of humor. I love the idea behind it. And I have to admit that my life itself can get quite windy, or should I say rather farty, at times. Even when I think my Buddhist practice is going well, I can let the interpersonal forces of the material world rock my boat and keep me tense. I find myself at times time traveling back and forth between some offense and some slight. The criticism to the how dare they say that to me replay over and over in my mind, in all of our heads, disturbing our peace. And just like Su Shi, we think we are doing so good at being mindful. And someone criticizes us or takes a position that offends us, and it seems like all our practice has gone out the window. There's a lot of abuse going on, especially within social media. And with us being cut off from being able to be present with each other in person, social media, Zoom, web conferencing, FaceTime, all these things are taking the place of our normal social interactions. But there's a lot of challenges that come with that. And with that, I think you're seeing a lot more abusive language, or people taking very strong positions and yelling and getting angry at one another over even basic positions we take. I think there's a lot of name calling, baiting others, labeling. Criticism is the soup of our interaction as of late. Around a year ago, I had the privilege to be a part of an interfaith panel with KRCL, and it made me realize how events of the past 3 years have really created a groundswell of not just this type of stuff, this anxiety-inducing stress, poor civil communication, polarity. There's also been this amazing coherence of community, of caring, of action, of learning, of humility, of opening up of hearts. One of the things when I was part of that panel is I wanted to emphasize, which was specifically about the election and dealing with the political anxiety that was caused by the election, was our need to continue to listen to one another. That has not changed. And that we should consider listening to more than just our allies, but everyone. Even our favorite uncle, who all of a sudden we never realized had the views he now is sharing with us. Or our father, who voted for the opposite of what we did. Listening in itself will not solve anything, but it will help us to see one another as fellow human beings, fellow travelers, is what we all are, regardless of party, politics, or view of the world. Each of us have inherent value, and by so doing, by so listening to somebody, we are telling ourselves that we need to listen. But when we label somebody, when we put somebody in a camp, it gives us an excuse not to have to listen to someone. There is an old saying that you never talk politics or religion. Wow. That's only in America. That's not true anywhere else in the world. That's only here in America. And maybe because we've never talked about politics or religion, that we've got ourselves in the mess we're in right now. We thought everything was just fine. Everything was just great. And we turn around and it's not. In some of the banter on our panel, there was a comment, because Thanksgiving was coming up, that we should have Thanksgiving be a politics-free zone, and I get that. But at the same time, when we have an opportunity to listen to someone, what better place is there than around food and family? And why do we avoid such talk? Is it our need to be right? Do we get angry when someone doesn't agree with us? Do we get angry at someone else's need to be right? And aren't they the same thing? Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes there are not good times when to speak about things. And we talked about that in our Right Speech Dharma talk a few weeks ago. Timing is important. But I think it's also important for us not to avoid conversations, to listen, to understand, not to listen to convince someone you are right and they are wrong. Sometimes we need to take the opportunity when it presents itself to understand another. If we know our uncle is rather crazy about a certain position, learn to understand where that comes from, where he is, where it makes sense to him to feel this way. It will help you see him as a person and where he's coming from. It does not mean you agree. It does not mean you support his position necessarily, but it helps you to understand him. Sometimes we need to do this. We need to take them because we may be offended, and that is okay. Are we afraid to be offended? And is it possible for us to have equanimity in that feeling of offense? Even when we think somebody is wrong, I'm always curious, why does their criticism hurt? I've never understood that. People I have very little respect for, sometimes their criticism directed at me hurts. Why? I don't have any respect for them or their position, and still it does. What's going on there? What can be taught or learned from that response? And my question is, when did disagreeing with someone mean that you hate them, or that you disrespect them, or that you see them less? When did that happen? I don't know. And I don't know why that is the way it is. So now I want to kind of change perspective from this kind of political, quasi-political position, but from just a basic everyday interaction. Now, how many of you have had a close friend, um, even a best friend, a lover, a child, that has said something to you that hurt you, that offended you? Some little kids, unsure with language, do that with an unintended but amazing offensiveness sometimes. You have to remind yourself they're just a child. Some people have learned that a cutting word hurts much more than a fist when they get angry. When others attempt to abuse us or say things that are meant to trigger us, their attempts have more to do with them than us. Here is an everyday example of how criticism can get under your skin. So, I work as a corporate trainer, and one of the things that we do regularly is we do evaluations. So, a training class will evaluate my content, will evaluate me as a trainer, and then we get to review those evaluations. And it's interesting how at a class of 12, I can get 10 wonderful evaluations about how I'm one of the best trainers they've ever had, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I am feeling great about myself. I am the poster child of great trainers. Look at me. I should be in the dictionary under great trainer. And then I read the next two evaluations and they're critical. And all of a sudden I become fixated on the critical review. I've just had 10 really good reviews. The critical review is the thing that I focus on, that I look at, that I read over and over again. I start thinking about it, and I start thinking, oh no, I might need to find a new career because I am now the worst trainer ever, and what did I do wrong? We do that though, don't we? It's just strange. A few years ago, doing the same kind of job, I was at a meeting at work and I was interacting with others. And they did not like what I was asking them to do. It made them do more work. And there was some pretty direct criticism, maybe a little unfair, but it was direct. And I remember thinking in my head, with great indignation, how dare they challenge me? I've been doing this for 10 years. I know what I'm doing. It's kind of interesting, that fight or flight response, that kind of reaction that we have. I was pissed. It was interesting. It was interesting that my response would to be so haughty in some ways. I think when our emotions take us to this place, when we follow them there, all listening shuts down. Shortly after this incident, I was reading a book, and I really wish I could remember the title of the book. But there was a line in the book that really hit home. And this was a line, quote, "Many times when we get defensive, it's because we are secretly afraid that what they are saying is true. The more defensive, the more fearful we are that they are right." End quote. Now, we don't want to admit that maybe we're wrong. We don't want to lose face. How many poor behaviors or unskilled actions have gone on so much longer than they needed to, simply because of our pride? Now, this short passage was transformative in my life. It was that perfect place and time for me to read it. And it changed my relationship with Linnea, my relationship with some of my friends. Now, trust me, there are still times that my being offended or being defensive sneaks out from behind my amygdala and it's ready to fight. But it is different. So how do we interact with criticism? What do we do with abuse? And I appreciate this from Reverend Guillaume Kabose Sensei, my mentor and teacher. He says, quote, "Abuse and criticism are not bad in themselves. You can profit by them if you learn from them by taking a serious look into yourself. If the criticism is true, accept it. Use it as fertilizer for growth. If the criticism is false, it's got nothing to do with you. End quote. I think that oftentimes I don't even look into myself. I just react. I get defensive. Now, the importance of a regular meditation practice, mindfulness practice, is it helps us to be more grounded. So there is that gap between stimulus and response. The more grounded we are in our practice, we no longer avoid criticism in that reactive way, but we see it as an opportunity for self-discovery, especially when it's coming from someone we respect. It is still for us to determine whether it is fertilizer or not. The Buddha also taught the following, quote, "You make things worse when you flare up at someone who is angry. Whoever doesn't flare up at someone who is angry wins a battle hard to win. You live for the good of both, your own, the others. When knowing the others provoked, you mindfully grow calm. When you work the cure of both, your own, the others, those who think you a fool know nothing of the Dharma." End quote. Now, there are a few stories in the life of the Buddha that show us how to deal with criticism and abuse. This one is from the earliest writings of the Buddha, and it's told by Gyome Kabose Sensei. The Buddha never became upset or angry when others criticized him. He was quite self-possessed in his response to the harshest of criticism. Ananda, his cousin, and one of his disciples who was with him for over 25 years asked the Buddha, "Why is it that you keep calm and not be offended by those who abuse you?" The Buddha replied with a parable. "Suppose there is a man who puts feces, also known as shit, on a silver tray and offers it to you. Will you take it?" And Ananda answered, "Not if there was shit on the plate. I certainly would not." Then the Buddha said, "Well, if you don't take it, who has it?" Ananda answered, "The one who offered it must still have it." "Quite right," the Buddha said. "Abusers are like shit. This is why I do not receive them. There is no reason for me to become angry or excited. If you do not receive abuse, you will not become angry at anyone. It's not a problem at all. You suffer because you make the abuse your own." End quote. I really love the story and I love the imagery, and I think sometimes it's good to remember that imagery when somebody is being abusive or antagonistic, trying to trigger you. You can imagine them handing you a piece of shit on a silver platter. I think sometimes the silver platter, people think, well, it must be of value, it's on a silver platter. Well, no matter how pretty people dress things up that are abusive, they're still abusive. So I think on self-reflection, what I would like you to do this coming few days is what or who in your life, ask yourself this question, what or who in your life is handing you a steaming tray of poop? And the next question is, why are you accepting it? So here's another story. This is when the abuse or criticism are unfounded, undeserved, or the abuse of a bully. And this comes from the Pali Canon, again from the Buddha. A man went up to the Buddha and verbally abused him. The Buddha drew an analogy how gifts that are not accepted are returned and said to the man, "In the same way, sir, that which you have insulted me, who is not insulting, that which you have taunted me, who is not taunting, that which you have berated me, who is not berating, that I don't accept from you. It's all yours, sir. It's all yours. Whoever returns insult to one who is insulting, returns taunts to one who is taunting, returns a berating to one who is berating, is said to be eating together, sharing company with that person. But I am neither eating together nor sharing your company, sir. It's all yours. It's all yours. End quote. And this. After being asked what is his teaching by a traveling priest, the Buddha responded, and here's a paraphrase of what he taught. Very straightforward. The sort of teaching, friend, where one does not keep quarreling with anyone in the cosmos, with its gods, demons, or priests, with its contemplatives and its royalty and common folk. No one is quarreling. His teaching is to show us a way to be at peace. Here is the Buddha's teachings about responding to another's anger with anger. I think all of these show us the way in dealing with criticism, abuse, and our own complicity. They give us an opportunity to look within, but most importantly, they give us an opportunity to practice non-attachment and compassion. So how does criticism and abuse allow us to practice compassion? And I love this quote from Shamish Prince-Vali. Quote, the majority of people in our world say and do what they do from their own set of fears, conclusions, defenses, and attempts to survive. Most of it, even when aimed directly at us, has nothing to do with us. Usually it has more to do with all the other times, and in particular, the first few times that this person experienced a similar situation, usually when they were young. This frees us a little to be more detached from the reactions of people around us. How often do we react to a statement of another by being offended rather than seeing that the other might actually be hurting? In fact, every time we get offended, it is actually an opportunity to extend kindness to one who may be suffering, even if they themselves do not appear that way on the surface. End quote. When we're not offended by the words of another, when we do not accept their abuse, we can actually hear what they're saying and maybe even touch their suffering, their confusion, or their fears. This is the core practice of our lives, to listen deeply. To listen deeply is a call to presence. Let us take the teachings of the Buddha into our personal lives. Let us not be tossed about by the eight winds. By opening ourselves up to listen to what each wind is trying to teach us. Everything is trying to wake us up. Everything is a teacher. Let us learn the music that's in the winds so that we may be made free. Namo Amida Butsu.